Okay, then we've got pre-Islamic sorcery and alchemy. I don't really have time to talk about that, but that in turn birthed what is called the assassin cult. Now, some of you may have heard of this. There was a group that came out of Orthodox Islam that was called the Ishmaelians. It was like a splinter group. And these Ishmaelians were a small but powerful heresy. And one of their chief leaders was a sheikh by the name of Hassan-i-Sabah. And this guy led a group that was called the Hashishim. Excuse me, that's where we get our word assassin, is from the Arabic word Hashishim. Now, why were they called Hashishim? Because the word means eaters of hashish. Now, most of you probably have heard of hashish. I hope none of you have tried it, but maybe some of you have. I certainly had my share in my day. Hashish is a powerful form of marijuana, a distillation of its chemically active ingredient delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, which is called THC for short, and it's what gives marijuana its hallucinogenic properties. So if you take hash, or as it's called colloquially, you get quite a buzz off it. And how this guy worked, he is kind of the father of the modern day conspiracy. He was the father of modern day espionage. And he was the first programmer, the first mind control operator. And this is what he did. If someone wanted to join his group, he knew he needed elite warriors because he had all of Islam arrayed against him. And if any of you have studied Islam, you understand that it has a very interesting approach to soul winning. You come up to someone and you say, "You're going to become a Muslim?" If you say no, I'm going to cut your head off. That's how they worked. That is called jihad, holy war. That's why to this very day you will find certain Islamic factions that will think nothing of blowing themselves and dozens of other people up in what they believe is a service of their God, Allah. And so what happens is they believe if they die in jihad, in holy war, they will go straight to Islamic paradise. Now, what's Islamic paradise like? Well, in the days of this Hassan, what you had was the belief, first of all, there were no women in heaven. Sorry, no women. Because women didn't even have souls. That's why even to this very day, women are treated very badly in the Islamic faith. Beyond that, when you died, you would go to a place called paradise, where you could do all the stuff you weren't allowed to do as a Muslim. You could eat pork, you could drink wine, and there were these beautiful angels called Uris that looked just like Playboy centerfolds, and they would minister to your every whim throughout eternity. And this is the Islamic paradise. Now, what Hassan would do with one of these recruits, because he needed someone who was just a fanatic, and what he would do is he would bring this person in and feed them a sumptuous meal. And the meal would be laced with copious amounts of hashish. In other words, he'd get the guy really stoned. I mean, we're talking seriously stoned here. And then he would take him into a secret garden in the heart of his castle, and there would be beautiful women, all the pork he could eat, all the wine he could drink, and for 3 or 4 hours the guy would just really enjoy himself. And then he would bring him back when he started coming down off the trip. And he would sit him in the chair and he would say, "I have taken you to paradise. I have that power. If you serve me in jihad and die in my service, you will go straight to paradise for all eternity." What do you think the guy said? "Where do I sign up?" You know. And these guys were total fanatics. I mean, he was famous for doing things like he'd have 10 of them line up on a wall, he'd snap his fingers, and they'd jump in unison 1,000 feet to their deaths, grinning all the way, because they were dying in his service and they knew they would go straight to paradise. That's mind control, pure and simple. And it didn't stop there. He also invented the idea of the mole. Not the little critters that dig up your lawn, but an agent, an espionage agent who is hidden deep within the enemy organization, and then when they were needed, they would be called upon to do something. The story is told about a particular person, a caliph. Now, a caliph was like a religious leader in medieval Islam who also was a general. And this caliph came up against and tried to attack Hassan's castle. And Hassan sent him a message. And the message said, if you come any closer to me, you will die. And he laughed. The caliph just laughed. He says, I am surrounded by 150 retainers and bodyguards. Some of them have been with me for 15 or 20 years. Most of them are my own relatives. I am invincible. You can't touch me. The next morning he woke up and there were 9 assassin daggers buried around his pillow on his head. Needless to say, he retreated. When Hassan-i-Sabbah died, his last word, he never was caught. He never was captured by the Orthodox Muslims. And on his deathbed, his last words were, nothing is true, everything is permissible. And those have become some of the bywords of the Illuminati that he had such a profound influence on. Okay, moving along. What happened next is the royal secret of Masonry passed from the Assassins to the Templars. Now, the Knights Templar were warrior knights. They were Catholics that took part in the Crusades that you've probably all heard about. They went over to the Holy Land to try and capture the Holy Land back from the Saracens. Now, the Saracens were a kind of Muslims. During this conflict, which lasted over a century, they began to interface with the Assassins. They began to share each other's secrets. And so when they lost the Crusades, the Templars went back to Europe, immensely wealthy, immensely powerful, and full of occult knowledge. Now, you got to understand something about the Templars. They got very wealthy because they basically provided protection for the pilgrims as they journeyed from Europe to visit the sacred places in the Holy Land. And they got very, very wealthy. Plus, there are legends that say that they found Solomon's treasure buried in the ruins of Solomon's temple in Jerusalem, and that they were fabulously wealthy. They got so powerful, and interestingly enough, they became the first international banksters. Everybody tries to blame the Jews for that one, but actually the first international banksters were in fact the Templars. And they got so powerful and so wealthy, they threatened the Vatican, which was not a wise thing to do. So the Pope got together with the King of France, and they conspired to bring down the Templars. In 1307, on October 13th, Friday, they sent out warrants and captured every Knight Templar that they could find, including the Grand Master, whose name was Jacques de Molay. Now, Jacques de Molay was a pretty sinister fellow, and some of you may have heard of the Masonic order, the de Molays. It's named after Jacques de Molay, believe it or not. And this fellow was a pedophile. He enjoyed having sex with young boys. He was also an idolater. He worshipped an idol named Baphomet, and he was a practitioner of black magic. And this is the guy that the Masons idolize as a hero for their young boys. What I tell people is to name a young boys order after after Jacques de Molay is like having a Ted Bundy home for battered women. It's sort of a brutal irony, don't you think? So anyway, when de Molay, this wonderful spiritual giant, died, burned at the stake, and I don't advocate that, please. I mean, I think it was a horrible thing that they did to the Templars. He didn't die the death of a martyr. He wasn't like Stephen and said, you know, Lord, please forgive them. He cursed them. He cursed the Pope, and he cursed the king, and he said within a year they would both be dead. And within a year they both were. Now, whether that's because he was a powerful sorcerer or whether it was because there were assassins who did the job for him, we don't know. So, nobody knows what happened to the treasury of the Templars. It vanished. And the best guesses that we have is that it went up to Scotland where it was hidden, along with some remnants, because there are vestiges of Templar culture up in the Highlands of Scotland that go back to the 1400s. The next thing is, about 100 years later, along came the Rosicrucians. They had the same secret. Some people say that they were just a resurfacing of the Knights Templar under a different name. After that, just 34 years later, we have Ignatius Loyola and the Jesuits. Now, Ignatius Loyola was a Spanish knight.